Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Iranian Red Crescent Society says more than 550 people have been killed since the U.S. and Israel launched a full-scale military assault on Iran early Saturday. The unprovoked attack prompted Iran to launch missiles across the Middle East, targeting Israel and Gulf Arab nations. The joint U.S. and Israeli war on Iran began with a daytime assault on high-security compound of Ali Khamenei, Iran's 86-year-old supreme leader. He was killed in the attack, along with his daughter and grandchild, and with Iran's defense minister, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the chief of staff of Iran's armed forces, senior intelligence officials, and other Iranian leaders. Scores of civilians have also been killed in southern Iran. A missile struck a girls' elementary school in the city of Manab, killing at least 165 people. Nearly 100 others were injured. Video of the aftermath shows rescuers searching through twisted concrete and rubble strewn with textbooks and backpacks as screams are heard in the background.
As we entered the school, we saw the body of a teacher that had been cut in half. And as you can see, we are still clearing the debris, and even now, body parts are still coming out.
In another strike, 18 people, most of them children, were killed in Lamerd in southern Iran when a missile struck residences and a gymnasium. About 100 people were wounded in that attack. In a video message, President Trump called for regime change and urged Iranians to take over their government. On Sunday, Trump confirmed reports that 3 U.S. service members have been killed, a toll that's since risen to 5. Trump said there would likely be more injuries and deaths ahead in an operation he said could last for weeks.
For almost 50 years, these wicked extremists have been attacking the United States while chanting the slogan, "Death to America," or "Death to Israel," or both. They are the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. We are the world's greatest and most powerful nation, so we can do something about what they do.
President Trump launched the attacks without congressional approval. They came shortly after Omani mediators held a breakthrough in indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran and Geneva when Iran agreed to zero stockpiling of uranium as a guarantee that it would not pursue a nuclear weapon. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi condemned the U.S. for abandoning diplomacy.
Contrary to Americans, that their record is very bad and very negative. You know, this is the second time that we negotiated with Americans and they decided to attack us right in the middle of negotiation.
In Israel, an Iranian ballistic missile struck a residential district of Beit Shemesh on Sunday, killing 9 people and wounding 27 others. Another strike killed a woman in Tel Aviv. Other Iranian missiles were intercepted by Israeli defenses, including one that crashed onto a street in Jerusalem, injuring several people. Iran also launched retaliatory strikes against all Gulf Arab nations that host U.S. military bases, with the exception of Oman, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. All were struck. 1 person was killed in Abu Dhabi, another person killed in Kuwait, where a defense ministry official reported 3 U.S. F-15 fighter jets were mistakenly shot down by Kuwaiti air defenses. In Saudi Arabia, an oil refinery caught fire after it was struck by debris from an Iranian missile, closing a facility that processes over 500,000 barrels of crude oil a day. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has effectively come to a halt due to the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran. Oil prices have surged to a 52-week high, with many analysts predicting they could soon top $100 a barrel. Hundreds of thousands of travelers have been stranded as all flights through some of the world's busiest international airports have been grounded. Stock markets across Asia opened sharply lower on fears the attack on Iran will slow the global economy. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 31 people have been killed and nearly 150 wounded since Israel launched renewed airstrikes on Beirut's suburbs and other parts of Lebanon on Sunday. Tens of thousands of residents of southern and eastern Lebanon were seen fleeing their homes after Israel ordered people in nearly 50 villages to evacuate ahead of a planned bombing campaign. Israel's military says its renewed war on Lebanon comes in response to missiles and drones fired by Hezbollah in retaliation for the assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. They were Hezbollah's first major violations of a ceasefire that took effect in November 2024. During that time, the United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, documented more than 15,000 ceasefire violations committed by Israel. Officials in the United Kingdom say an Iranian drone struck a British airbase in Cyprus overnight, causing limited damage and no casualties. Iran's attack came after British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he'd agreed to the Pentagon's request to use British military bases for what Starmer called defensive strikes on Iranian missile sites. Separately, France said it was sending 2 warships to the Red Sea to join a European naval mission. Meanwhile, Germany's foreign minister denied reports that Berlin was seriously considering joining the war against Iran. In Spain, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez condemned the U.S.-Israeli strikes as a breach of international law.
Se puede estar contra un régimen odioso.
It is possible to be against a hateful regime, as Spanish society as a whole is against the Iranian regime, and at the same time be against an unjustified, dangerous military intervention that's outside international law. One must be against a war that was started without the authorization of the United States Congress or the United Nations Security Council.
On Saturday, Russia and China requested an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, where China's foreign minister called for an immediate ceasefire and the resumption of talks. Russia condemned the U.S.-Israeli attacks as another unprovoked act of armed aggression. Today, U.S. First Lady Melania Trump is presiding over a UN Security Council meeting titled Children, Technology, and Education in Conflict. It's the first time a spouse of a world leader has chaired such a session, and comes just days after U.S.-Israeli strikes killed scores of Iranian school children. The White House says top Trump administration officials will brief both chambers of Congress Tuesday about the U.S. strikes on Iran. President Trump launched the attacks without congressional authorization, which is required under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. On Saturday, Democratic Congressmember Ro Khanna of California and Republican Congressmember Thomas Massie of Kentucky demanded swift action on a war powers resolution that would rein in Trump's attack unless Congress approves military action. This comes as top Democrats, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, are under fire from anti-war groups who note they oppose Trump's attack on Iran on procedural grounds rather than opposition to war. A Reuters Ipsos poll conducted over the weekend found only 1 in 4 U.S. residents approves the U.S. strikes on Iran. In Pakistan, at least 24 people were killed Sunday as angry protests over the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran were met with violence. In Karachi, security guards at the U.S. consulate fired on demonstrators who breached the outer wall, killing 10 people. At least 14 were killed in northern Pakistan, where demonstrators vandalized several buildings and set fire to United Nations regional offices. Meanwhile, Pakistan escalated its war on Afghanistan's Taliban over the weekend with an attempted strike on Bagram Air Base, the former U.S. military base north of Kabul. Hundreds of soldiers and scores of civilians have been killed in cross-border fighting since Pakistan announced a state of open war with Afghanistan last week. In Texas, at least 2 people were killed and 14 wounded early Sunday during a mass shooting at a bar in a busy nightlife district in Austin. This marked the 58th mass shooting in the United States so far this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive. The FBI is investigating the shooting as a possible act of terrorism after the suspect reportedly wore a shirt with an Iranian flag design and a hoodie with the words "Property of Allah" printed on it. The suspect was identified as 53-year-old Ndiaga Diagne. a naturalized U.S. citizen from Senegal. He was fatally shot by police. Trump's Republican allies have manipulated the shooting to perpetuate anti-immigrant hate speech and policies, but have again refused to call for stricter gun reform laws. At least the identities of the victims have not been made public. At least 3 of those hospitalized were in critical condition. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel has condemned the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran, saying, quote, "The execrable act constitutes an unscrupulous violation of all norms of international law and human dignity." His remarks came as President Trump continued his threats against Cuba. On Friday, Trump said the United States may launch a so-called friendly takeover of the island.
They're in a big deal of trouble, as you know. They have no money, they have no anything right now, but they're talking with us, and maybe we'll have a friendly takeover of Cuba.
Former President Bill Clinton denied having any knowledge of sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's crimes during a 6-hour closed-door deposition Friday in front of the House Oversight Committee. Clinton's sworn testimony marked the first time a former U.S. president has been compelled to testify before Congress. He's also the most high-profile figure to respond to questioning following the release of the Epstein files. This is part of Clinton's opening statement, which he shared on social media.
I saw nothing and I did nothing wrong. As someone who grew up in a home with domestic violence, not only would I not have flown on his plane if I had any inkling of what he was doing, I would have turned him in myself and led the call for justice for his crimes, not the sweetheart deal that we got.
Former President Clinton's testimony came one day after his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, told the committee she didn't know Epstein. Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's private jet a number of times in the early 2000s. He also appears in a photo with Epstein and a woman whose identity was redacted sitting in a hot tub. Clinton adamantly denied knowing the woman in his congressional testimony. And a North Dakota judge has said he will order Greenpeace to pay damages estimated at $345 million, a move that could potentially bankrupt the environmental group. Last year, a jury sided with Energy Transfer, the corporation behind the Dakota Access Pipeline, a closely watched trial and lawsuit by the Texas-based pipeline company, which accused Greenpeace of orchestrating criminal behavior by training and providing funds to the indigenous-led protests at Standing Rock between 2016 and 17. Greenpeace argued the lawsuit was part of a conspicuous attempt by corporations to destroy the right to free speech. Last March, Democracy Now! Spoke to Deepa Padmanabha, senior legal advisor for Greenpeace USA.
What's really important to know is that, this case is not just an obvious and blatant erasure of Indigenous leadership, of Indigenous resistance, but this case is also so much bigger than just Greenpeace. It is an attack on the broader movement and all of our First Amendment rights to free speech and peaceful protest.
Judge James Guyon previously cut the jury award nearly in half, from more than $670 million to about $345 million. Greenpeace could appeal to the North Dakota Supreme Court. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.